Hello everyone. I told you I was going to record it. I'm not very good at publicly reading. I have a good reading level myself, but I'm not good at publicly reading. I stutter a lot or I pause randomly. So please don't make fun of me while I read this video. Well, not video, it's a book, but while I make this video, don't make fun of me. Because I have a hard time reading in class because it's kind of hard to read for publicly out loud. I'm better at reading in my head and it takes me a while to register out loud. So thank you. The Blood Gospel by James Rollins and Rebecca Cantrell. Prologue. Spring AD 73. Mazda, Israel. The dead continued to sing, 300 feet above Eleazar's head. The chorus of 900 Jewish rebels sang out in defiance of the Roman legion at their gates. The defenders had sworn to take their own lives rather than be captured. Those final prayers, chanted to the heaven on high, echoed down the tunnels below, carved out of the mountain of Mazda. Abandoning the doomed men to their bitter sunlight, Eleazar tore his gaze from the roof of the limestone passageway. He wished that he could chant beside them, that he could give up his own life in a final battle. But his destiny lay elsewhere. Another path. He gathered his precious block into his arms, the sun-warmed stone stretched from his hand to his elbow, the length of a newborn baby. Cradling the stone to his chest, he forced himself to enter the rough-hewn passage that sliced into the heart of the mountain. Masons sealed the way behind him. No living man could follow. Even soldiers who accompanied him had forged ahead with torches. Their thoughts must still be with their brothers, 900 above, on the sun-scorched plateau. The stronghold had been under siege for months. 10,000 Roman soldiers, split into enormous camps, surrounded the mesa, ensuring no one could leave or enter. The rebels vowed, when their chant was complete, to take their lives, of their families and their own, before the Romans overran their walls. They prayed and readied themselves to kill the innocent, as must I. Eleazar's task weighed upon him as heavily as a stone in his arms. His thoughts turned to what waited below, the tomb. He spent hours praying in the subterranean temple, knees pressed against the stone blocks fitted so close together that not even an ant might escape. He studied its smooth walls, high-arched ceilings. He admired the careful handiwork of the craftsmen who labored to make such a sacred space. Even then, he had not dared to look upon the sarcophagus in the temple, that unholy crypt that would hold the most unholy word of God. He hugged the stone tighter to his chest. Please, God, take this burden from me. This prayer, like thousands before, remained unanswered. The sacrifices of the rebels above must be honored. Their cursed lifeblood must serve a higher purpose. When he reached the arched doorway to the temple, he could not step through. Others jolted past their posts. He rested his forehead against the cold wall, praying for solace. None came. His gaze swept inside. Torchlight flickered, dancing shadows across the stone bricks that formed the arch roof ahead. Smoke swirled above, seeking escape, but there would be none. Not for any of them. At last his eyes settled on a small girl, on her knees, held down by soldiers. His heart ached at the piteous sight of her, but he would not forsake the task that had been asked of him. He hoped that she would shut her eyes, as he might not have to look into them at the end. eyes of water. That was how long his dead sister had described those innocent eyes, his daughter's eyes, her little Azuba. Eleazar stared now at his niece's eyes, the child's eyes, but it was not a child who glared back at him. She had seen what a child should never see, as soon would never, and soon would see no more. Forgive me, Azuba. With one last murmured prayer, he stepped into the torchlit tomb. Guttered flames rejected off the haunted eyes of the 7 soldiers who were waiting for him. They had fought the Romans for days, knowing that battle would end with their own deaths, but not like this. He nodded to them, and to the robed men in their midst. 9 grown men gathered to sacrifice a child. The men bowed their head to Eleazar, as if he were holy. In truth, he did not know how clean he was. Only he and the one he served knew that. Every man bore bloody wounds, some inflicted by Romans, others by the small girl they held captive. The purple robes she'd been forced to wear were too large, making her appear even smaller. Her dirty hands clutched a tattered doll sewn from leather tanned the color of the Judean desert, one button eye missing. How many years ago had he given it to her? He remembered the delight bursting from the tiny face when he knelt and offered it to her. He recalled thinking how much sunlight could be trapped in such a little body that could shine so brightly, fuel such simple joy as a gift of leather and cloth. He searched her face now, looking for that sunshine, but only darkness stared him back. She hissed, showing teeth. Azuba, he pleaded. Eyes, once as calm and as beautiful as a fawn's, glared at him with feral hatred. She drew a breath and spat hot blood in his face. He staggered, dazed in a silken feel, the iron smell of the blood. With one shaking hand, he wiped his face. He knelt before her and used a cloth to gently brush blood from her chin, then flung the soiled rag far away. Then he heard it. So did she. Eleazar and Azuba jerked both their heads. In the tomb alone they heard screams from atop the mountain. They alone knew the Romans had broken through the stronghold's defenses. The slaughter above had begun. The robed one noted their movement and knew what it meant. We have no more time. Eleazar looked to the older man in the dusty robe, their leader, the one who had demanded that this child be baptized amid such a horror. Age etched the leader's bearded face. Solemn, impenetrable eyes closed. His lips moved in silent prayer. His face shone with such surety of a man free of doubt. Finally those blessed eyes opened again, and found Eleazar's face as if searching for his soul. It made him recall another stare from another man, many, many years before. Eleazar turned away in shame. The soldiers gathered around the open stone sarcophagus in the center of the tomb that had been carved out of a single block of limestone, large enough to hold 3 grown men. But it would soon imprison only a small girl. Pyres of myrrh and frankincense smoldered at the corner. Through their fragrance, Eleazar smelled darker scents, bitter salts and acrid spices gathered according to the ancient Essene text. All lay in terrible readiness. Eleazar bowed his head one final time, praying for another way. Take me, not her. But the ritual called for them all to play their roles. A girl of corrupted innocence, a knight of Christ, a warrior of man. The robed leader spoke. His graveled voice did not waver. What must be done is God's will, to protect her soul and the souls of others. Take her. But not all had come here willingly. Azubah yanked free of her captors and sprang for the door, swift as a fallow doe. Eleazar alone possessed the speed to catch her. He grabbed her thin wrist. She struggled against his grip, but he was stronger. Men closed in around them. She pulled the doll to her chest and sank to her knees. She looked so wretchedly small. Their leader gestured to a nearby soldier. It must be done. The soldier stepped forward and snatched Azubah's arm, wrenching the doll away and tossing it aside. No, she cried, the first word forlorn, still sounding so much like a child, coming from her thin throat. She tore free again and surged forth the furious strength. She leapt onto the offending soldier, locking her legs around his waist. Teeth and nails tore at his face as she knocked him hard into the stone floor. 2 soldiers rushed to his aid. They pulled the wild girl off and pinned her down. Take her to the sepulchre, the leader commanded. The 2 men holding her hesitated, plainly fearing to move. The child thrashed under them. Eleazar saw her panic was not directed toward her captors. Her gaze remained fixed on what had been stolen from her. He retrieved the tattered figure of the doll and held it in front of her bloody face. It had quieted her many times when she was younger. He strove to block out the memories of her playing in the clear sunshine with her laughing sisters and this doll. The toy trembled in her hand. His hand. Her gaze softened into a plea. Her struggles calmed. She disentangled one arm from the men's grasps and reached for the doll. When her fingers touched it, her body sagged as she succumbed to her fate, accepting that escape was not possible. She sought her only solace, as she had as an innocent child, in the companionship of her doll. She did not want to go into the darkness alone. She lifted the figure to her face and pressed her small nose against its own. Her shape, a sigil of a childlike comfort. Waving his men away, he lifted the now quiet girl. He cradled her cold form against his chest. She nestled against him as she used to. He prayed for the strength to do what was right. The block of stone gripped in his free hand reminded him of his oath. To the side, their leader began the prayers of binding the sacrifice above to the one below, using ancient incantations, holy words, and tossing pinches of incense into the small pyres. Atop the mountain, the rebels took their lives as many Romans broke the gate. That tragic payment of blood would settle the debt here. With the block clutched in his hand, Eleazar carried the girl the few steps to the open sarcophagus that had already been filled nearly to the rim, sloshing and slimmering. It was to act as a mikveh, a ritual immersion bath for those to be purified. But rather than blessed water, wine filled this bath. Empty clay jugs littered the floor. Reaching the crypt, Eleazar peered into the depths. Torchlight turned wine to blood. Azubah buried her face in his chest. He swallowed bitter grief. Now, their leader ordered. Alright, you guys. I did not finish the prologue. There's still another page and a half before the first chapter, but I noticed the timer was running on 15 minutes, so I'll have to end it here. I know it's kind of a cliffhanger, but hey, it's always good to leave things on a cliffhanger. Makes people wanting more. So, if you liked this video, thumb it up. If you didn't, thumb it down. Tell me why in the comments below. I'm sorry I stuttered and fucked up a few words. I added words that weren't supposed to be there. I totally fucked up reading. I really did. Anyway, thank you all for being patient with me. It's really hard for me to read, like, out loud. In my head, I have, like, reading in my head to myself, I have a college grade reading level, but when it comes to reading out loud, I have the reading level of, like, a 5-year-old. I trip and stumble over a lot of words. But, like I said, if you liked this video, thumb it up. If you didn't, thumb it down. Tell me why in the comments below. And, as always, if you want more, subscribe. Peace.